Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Good. Happy New Year. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael. I am the youth leader here. I'm on staff, so you'll see me in and doing a lot of things. So if you ever have any questions or ever want to talk to me, feel free. Stop me, because I'm just running around usually. I'm super excited to jump into our series for the next couple of weeks called Practicing the Way. I don't know if any of you know John Mark Comer. He is the man, the myth, the legend. But he is so good at explaining the stuff that we're going to be talking about, and I'm really excited for all of us to jump into it as well. What's so cool about it is, and I think this is so cool, because no matter where you are in your walk with Christ, what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks is going to be for you. I've read his book last year. I went through his course last year. We did it with our college students, and it applies to you wherever you are. So you're here this morning, zone in, it's going to be for you. So yeah, let's jump into it. Have you ever had somebody in your life that you really looked up to and wanted to be like? Yeah? Think about it for a second. Who did you really want to be like? Why did you want to be like them? What made them so awesome? And what did you do to be like them? Right? If you think about people, you've had people like this. For me, two people pop up in my mind, and they are similar but opposite at the same time. One of them is Lionel Messi. Any Messi fans? There we go. Got a couple. If you find Cape, he's running around in a soccer jersey. It's not Messi, but it's close enough. And then the other one is Usain Bolt. Any Usain Bolt people? There we go. Got a couple. All right. So if you're a soccer fan, you know Messi. Even if you don't watch soccer, you probably know Messi. He's now in Miami, which is really cool. The greatest soccer player to ever touch a ball. But in high school, I was super big into soccer, and so were all of my friends. So we'd go home and play video games and watch soccer on TV. And this guy was the man. I don't know, like I said, if you've ever watched soccer, it looks probably boring if you don't like it. But if you're into it, what that guy did with the ball is insane. It looked like it was glued to his shoe. He would run circles around you before you even knew what happened. It was crazy. But as you dive deeper into who Messi was and how he grew up and what he did training, it was even more interesting. Messi, as a young boy, I found this out, and I was like, I want to be like that. He would leave his house and go to the convenience store, which was quite a ways away, and he would juggle a soccer ball. And juggling isn't like with your hands, you're juggling. You're like juggling the ball all the way down the street to the convenience store and back without dropping it. This guy was insane, so I'd want to be like him, and I would try doing that, and I was never good at juggling. But that's what I wanted to be like. This guy was never the biggest, he was never the fastest, but he was a menace on the soccer field because of the way he trained and his skill with the ball. I wanted to be like him, so I tried everything I could to learn and to become him. The other guy, like I said, was Usain Bolt. He looks kind of like me, big, tall, strong. So that's how we connected. Why is everybody laughing? Anyways, Usain Bolt was the man. If you ever watched him, he would walk out of the tunnel, and he has such confidence that you're like, oh, he already won. Why are we even here? And then he would get to the line, and you would just see him compared to the other runners, and you're like, that guy, like an NFL linebacker? Like, what's he doing on the track? And he would run the 100 and smoke everybody. Like, they wouldn't even be in the picture. He would turn around and laugh at them as he crossed the finish line. And then he'd run the 200, and he'd do the same thing, but even worse. It was insane. And I wanted to be like him, not because of how good he was. Obviously, he was good. But because of his confidence. So I would, when I walk out to run for track, I started to get pretty good my senior year. And I was like, all right, Usain Bolt time. Like, zone in. And I'll walk up to the line, and I'd be like, getting all loose and stuff. And I'd look beside me, I'm like, oh, okay, I got this. And I'd run, and I'd only think about Usain Bolt running. I was like, I'm going to win. And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, but that's okay. But I wanted to be just like them. I aimed to be like these guys as much as I could. And I wanted to do really just what they did in the way that they did it, because it was so cool. And the truth is, if we are honest with ourselves, the truth is that we're all looking at people and following them to a degree. We're all following someone or something. So the question for us to start out today is, who are you following in life? Who do you look up to in life? What are the influences you have in your life? Who are you trying to imitate? And today we're going to be looking at following Jesus, what that looks like, and how we can do this better in our everyday life. So we're going to be looking at following Jesus and what that looks like in our everyday life. So turn with me in your Bibles to Mark chapter 1, verse 16 and 18. We're going to start there. Verse 16. One day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people," which for us sounds kind of weird, but back in that day was pretty normal, saying, hey, I will show you how to go and reach people and teach people. In verse 18, makes me drop my jaw, because when you think about it, it's insane. 18, and they left their nets at once and followed him. They left their nets at once and followed him. How wild that they dropped everything. Think about Jesus asking you to do this in your life today. They dropped everything to follow him. They left their jobs, something that they were familiar with, comfortable with, right? Could we do that? They left their family to go and travel with Jesus. They left their friends to go and travel and follow Jesus. How crazy is it that they just dropped it? Said, we're done. All right. So the question is, why did they drop everything to follow Jesus? What made it that great that they could drop everything? And here's the thing. They knew that Jesus was a rabbi, a master, or a teacher worth following. The cost to follow him was worth the cost to drop everything. Just let that sink in. The cost to follow him was worth the cost to drop everything. And to set this up for us, we have to kind of go back and look at first century Israel. And I'm not a big history guy, but I do find this really cool if we kind of think about this. Rabbis would walk around from place to place teaching the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, or just the Bible in general, with a small group behind them called the Talmudim. Talmud, another word for that is like a student, a disciple, or if you look at most scholars today, they say the best way to kind of compare this is an apprentice. And I kind of like that. That's probably what we'll be talking about over the next couple of weeks is we'll use the word apprentice. But it helps us visualize what they were doing. You think about an apprentice to a plumber, well, he's watching them how to do it, right? An apprentice to a teacher, an apprentice to a doctor, they're watching how to do it. So they had their Talmudim behind them. And to get to this point, to being an apprentice to a rabbi, you had to complete your schooling, which is super different than the way we do school today, right? School today, we go to school, we take our notes, we take a test. Hopefully we pass the test and we move on to the next grade. This was a little bit different. The point of school back then was not to take a test and make it to the next grade. It was to be formed into somebody. So they were teaching you to form you into somebody or something. Completely different than school today. At age 5 years old, kids started going to Beit Sefer, which is kind of like the equivalent of elementary school. It was also known as the House of the Book, which was, equivalent to our elementary school. So their primary textbook was the Bible. By age 13, you ready for this? Most students would memorize the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. By age 13, they memorized the Torah. I don't know about y'all, but I don't know if I could do that today. That's insane. And a big reason of this was because it was an oral culture. They talked it all. They spoke it all, which helps, right? You're not just sitting there trying to learn it for a test. Like I said, they were being formed rather than just focus on a test. And by this point, at age 13, most students were done. They went home to apprentice in their family business or work the farm or whatever it was that their family was doing. By age 13, they were going home to do that. But the best would go to the next level of schooling called Beit Midrash, which was called also called the House of Learning, equivalent to like our high school. And this is even more crazy. By age 17, think about if you had a kid and they got to 17, where they were mentally. Probably not this. They memorized most, if not all, of the entire Old Testament. Crazy. Y'all want to know how many verses that is? Take a guess. 1,000? 23,000. Let that sink in for a second. It is insane what they were learning at this point. Think about how that formed you. Don't you think you'd be formed if you could memorize that and allow that to sink in? So that's by age 17. And by this point, most of them were done. If you did that, I'd say you accomplished something in life. It's pretty amazing. But there was another level. The best of the best would go and try to apprentice under a rabbi. So if you were lucky enough to apprentice under a rabbi, and what I mean by lucky is you had to go find a rabbi. The rabbi would kind of put you through a test to see if you really knew your stuff and answered in the way that he answered. And if he said yes, he would allow you to follow him. And for the rest of your life, if you found a rabbi to apprentice under, you were focused on 3 goals. First one is to be with your rabbi. Be with your rabbi. So this means you're following your rabbi around 24/7. You're following him around. You're watching him. You're learning from him. You did everything your rabbi did. When your rabbi ate, you ate. When he prayed, you prayed. When he slept, you slept. When he traveled, you traveled. You get the picture, right? So you were following your rabbi, doing everything your rabbi did. I don't know how many of you, have you ever watched like a day in a life video? So you get a day in a life. It's getting really common in like college athletes. They do a day in a life of a college athlete. Anybody ever seen this? Yes. Some people are like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. What they do is they record themselves throughout the whole day, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. So getting ready, going to class, what they needed to prepare for class and practice, going to the film study sessions, going to the weightlifting sessions, all this stuff, they film it. And for me, it's like, oh, that's cool, just to see kind of into the life of a college athlete. But for young people, think about what that looks like. I get to watch you in everything you do from my home and learn from you. That's kind of what the Talmudim, the followers, the apprentice of the rabbis were doing. They were watching them, but they were actually with them, following them. They couldn't just watch on the screen from home. They had to do it with them. So you are learning from them while watching their every single move throughout the day. So to relate this back to us is, who are we learning from in our daily life? Who are we learning from in our daily life? For me, I think of one person that comes up right off the bat for me right now. So I'm learning from Dave Ramsey. Anybody learn from Dave Ramsey in here? Yeah, good old Dave. So I'm reading the book, The Total Money Makeover, and I'm learning everything that Dave Ramsey has to say about money. And I take everything with a grain of salt. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't know. But I'm not Dave Ramsey, and I haven't accomplished what he's done, so I'm gonna take it and go with it for right now. But I love learning this, not just because like it's another way to become wealthy or financially responsible even, but it's also more of a biblical view of how to handle money, which is really cool. You don't get that in a lot of places. So I'm learning from Dave Ramsey, and I'm trying to apply what he's teaching me in this book right now to my everyday life, and it's hard. It's really hard. So that's who I'm learning from. So who are you learning from today? What are your influences today? And I think it's important that we kind of reflect on that, because if we're not careful, we're going to get some influences that we probably shouldn't have, making us into people maybe we shouldn't be or don't want to be without even knowing it. So first one is to be with your rabbi. That's the first goal of your apprenticeship. The second goal is to become like your rabbi. The heart and soul of apprenticeship was to be with your rabbi for the sake of becoming like your rabbi. That's feels like common sense, but if you're not taking that next step, you're missing it. I have a really good story to represent this, and I hope I do it justice explaining it. But last summer when our youth went to Fuge, we had the head leader of the camp, his name was Preston. And Preston I think he was a couple years younger than me, so young guy, good shape, all this stuff, and really focused on learning and growing and learning about who the Lord was. And one summer he went to apprentice under a guy named Soup. Don't know how he got the name Soup. I don't think it was his real name, but they called him Soup. He was an older man. He was going blind. His physical health was starting to get a little bit worse. So Soup needed help So they found a guy, this guy was Preston, to come and to help him, to apprentice under him really, but also just to help Soup get around. And because Soup needed so much help, Preston was literally by his side all the time. Soup needed help, just doing everything. But what was cool that just because Soup was being helped travel, Preston was learning, obviously, as he traveled with Soup and Soup was teaching. But because Preston was so close with Soup and Soup had bad health problems, he had a limp, and Preston had to help him, like hold his arm everywhere they went. Blind and had a limp, not a very good combination. So Preston was by his side the entire time. And let me remind you, Preston is like 26, 27. When Preston was done with this apprenticeship with Soup, he came back home, and what he realized, guess what? Preston had a limp. He had no idea, obviously, why, but there was nothing wrong with him. He was so close with Soup that he became like Soup in his limp. And that is what apprenticeship looks like, being so close to your rabbi that you are becoming like your rabbi. You are with them all the time. So the question that we have to answer here is, in what ways are we becoming like Jesus as you're learning more about who he is? In what ways are you becoming like Jesus? And this one's tough for me because the area that I think I'm becoming like Jesus in is really hard and has a lot to do with patience and how I respond to difficult situations. So for those of you who don't know me, I have two daughters. One is 3 and one is 3 months. And nothing I do can make my 3-year-old go any faster. Anybody there? Nothing I do can make my 3-year-old go any faster than her own pace of life. And my pace of life is faster than that. But she's in this stage where she wants to do everything on her own. I can just feel like the rage coming out in some parents right now because they're thinking about it. She wants to do everything on her own. So she wants to get dressed on her own. She wants to finish breakfast whenever she's done with breakfast, and that takes like an hour. She wants to put on her own socks and shoes, which she can't even really do. She can put on the shoes and socks. It just takes a long time. She wants to do everything. She wants to get in the car. She wants to buckle herself. She wants to do everything on her own. And when you're trying to get her to preschool by 9 o'clock, it's really hard, okay? It's really hard. And I get really frustrated. I'm just going to be honest. I get really frustrated with this. And sometimes I do take it out on her. I'm like, Eden, I promise you, if you let me do this, you can be in the car, you can be relaxing, you can be doing your own thing, but you're making me so frustrated right now because you're not listening. And really, as much as I want her to do what I want to do, what an opportunity that is to teach her in those moments how to do the things that she's doing so that one day I don't have to. I'm missing a great opportunity. I'm not relying on my patience to get through that. I'm just focused on moving to the next thing. And then because of that, I'm losing my self-control. I'm going crazy. I'm raging because my 3-year-old isn't listening to me. Who knew 3-year-olds didn't listen, right? It's like, why can't I just see that this is a really good opportunity for me rather than getting mad? So that's it for me. I'm learning how to be more patient and how to have more self-control in those moments, which also relates to other areas of life, right? That's just one example, but I'm learning how to do that. So how are you in your everyday life becoming more like Jesus? Something to think about. How are you becoming more like Jesus? And then the third thing, be with your rabbi to become like your rabbi, to do as your rabbi did. So you are doing as your rabbi did. The goal, the big picture goal of apprenticeship was to one day become a rabbi yourself. That you wouldn't do it if you weren't going to try to do that. So when your rabbi thought you were ready, when you had followed him long enough, when you had become like him enough, he would turn to you and he would say, well done, go and make disciples. You're on your own. You got it. You did it. You passed. Go. Which is super cool to think about it for other people. But guess what? We've been told to do this as well. We have been told to do this as well. We are ready to do this. Turn with me to Matthew 28, 18 through 20. 18 says, Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands that I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So there it is, right there. He's talking to the disciples, which also relates to us as well, because now we are a disciple of Jesus. We have been told to go and make disciples. This is so crazy and cool at the same time, because on one hand, I don't feel qualified to do this, but on the other hand, I'm so grateful that Jesus trusts me to do this. But what I like is that Jesus didn't say it by accident. Like, he meant it. Go and make disciples. Like, you're ready. You can do this. The things that I'm teaching you, you can now teach to other people. If you can't, then go and learn it again probably. But this is so cool that Jesus trusts us to do this. And Jesus kind of shows this in John 13 as he's washing the disciples' feet. Verse 12 says, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I'm doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you ought to go and wash others' feet. I have given you the example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. I love that as well. The story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet shows that, one, he is their teacher, right? He's making that very clear. Like, you call me teacher, you call me Lord, and that's who I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm teaching you. I want you to pay attention and watch. And now I want you to go do it as well. And as you're doing it, here's the cool thing. As you're doing it, God's going to bless you for doing it. You're going to see the fruit of doing it. So if you go and do the things that Jesus is doing, you're going to see the fruit of it. And if you're not seeing the fruit, maybe you're not doing it. Something to think about. If you're not seeing the fruit, either keep going and keep pushing in, or maybe you're really not doing it and you're trying to do it for yourself. So Jesus says, do as I have done to you. He taught them, he showed them, and now he is telling them it's their turn. Oh man, the pressure's on. So here's the question that we need to ask ourselves here is, what is God telling us to do? Where is it our turn to go and to do what we've been taught to do? For me, it's been this really big thing of living intentionally over the last couple of years. This means that every day when I wake up, I look for the purpose in what I'm doing. I'm really good at just living casually. Anybody with me? No? All right. Just living casually and just going with the flow. I'm really good at that. A+ on that. Living intentionally and like looking for the purpose in things, I got a lot of work to do, and I'm learning how to do that. So this means waking up and looking for the purpose in things. When I'm teaching our youth, it's like, man, am I doing this intentionally, or am I just doing it to show them some Bible verses? When I'm meeting with people, am I just meeting to hang out and talk about some sports, or am I really diving into how people are doing and living intentionally in that? And here's the thing, just like what verse 17 says, now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. If I'm living intentionally and I'm seeing the fruit, there's no better feeling than that. There's no better feeling than when our youth come up to me and they're like, oh, this is what we learned. Or I'm like, all right, what's this process called? And I hear sanctification. Like, yeah, let's go. That's it. You're learning. So we're doing it intentionally. And for you, it could be something different. And it doesn't have to be the super big thing that you've been learning over the past couple of years. It can be something right here and right now. Maybe you have to go talk to that person who keeps popping up in your mind. Maybe you just need to go have a conversation with them and see how they're doing. Maybe you need to create a solid routine this year to be in the presence of God. Maybe, if you want to join a ministry team. I don't know. Maybe you've been thinking about that for a while. Maybe I want to serve and join a ministry team. Maybe it's, hey, I'm ready to lead some people. I feel like God's taught me a lot. I'm going to lead some people. I'm going to find a group that I can pour into and do that. And what's cool about this step of doing like your rabbi did is this step requires action. So if you're not taking action, you're probably not doing it. Let's be real. You're going to see it. If you're not making any moves to do it, you're probably not following through with it. Got it? Those 3 steps. So, application to us right now of being with Jesus. Apprenticeship to Jesus revolves around these 3 things: being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and do as Jesus did. So, what are you doing to be with Jesus? What are you doing to be with Jesus? This is really wise guy named Dallas Willard. If you haven't heard of him, look him up. He says this: the first and most basic thing we can and must do is keep God before our minds. This is the fundamental secret of caring for our souls. Our part in this practicing the presence of God is to direct and redirect our minds constantly to Him. In the early time of practicing, we may well be challenged with our burdensome habits of dwelling on things less than God. But these are habits, not the law of gravity, and can be broken. A new grace-filled habit will replace the former one as we take intentional steps toward keeping God before us. Soon, our minds will return to God as the needle of a compass constantly returns to the north. If God is the great longing for our souls, He will become the pole star of our inward beings. I don't know. I know I couldn't say that any better than Dallas Willard. What am I talking about? Keeping Jesus in front of you is key. Making routines and reminders to do this is key. When you make your coffee, let that be a reminder to be in the presence of God. When you get in the car to go into school or to work, be in the presence of God. As you arrive at work, that's probably a good time to do it. Be in the presence of God. When you take your lunch break, another good time to do it. Be in the presence of God. When you leave to head home, be in the presence of God. When you're getting in bed, be in the presence of the Lord. The other day I was scrolling through Instagram, and one of the coolest people in the world to me, Megan Fate, came up. And she was talking about her practices, and she's so open about it, and this one is so cool. She said every time she wakes up, she goes to her coffee machine, and she presses the button to start the coffee. It's a trigger. And what she does in that moment is dive into prayer. As her coffee is brewing, no better time, right? You ain't got nothing else to do. Dive into prayer as soon as you press that button. And we can do the same thing. That's what's so cool about this. No matter how you wake up in the morning and do it, create a trigger. And that trigger is to remind you to dive into the presence of the Lord. Next one is, how are you becoming like Jesus? In what ways are you being transformed into the person of Jesus? This can look like loving like Jesus, thinking like Jesus, talking like Jesus, all things that are really hard and not natural to us, right? The more you are with Jesus, the more you will become like Jesus. Makes sense, right? That's how it's supposed to be. Luke 6:40 says this: teachers are not greater than their students are not greater than their teacher, but the student who is fully trained will become like their teacher. They will become like their teacher. And there's some clear signs that can show you you're becoming like Jesus. You ready for these? It's what these kids in the back and over here on the side are probably learning about to a degree right now, is the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If you're experiencing those things, you're probably becoming more like Jesus. Amen? That is what's so cool, is when you are experiencing these things, they are clear signs that you are becoming more like Jesus. So when I'm take a second, I'm like, all right, I got to be patient with Eden. I got to have more self-control with Eden. I'm learning to be like Jesus with my daughter, with my family, with my work, people I interact with. I'm learning to become like Jesus from being with Jesus. And then to wrap it all up is, what are you doing to replicate the things Jesus has shown you? The more you are with Jesus, the more you become like Jesus, making you able to do the things that Jesus did. It all makes sense. This is why the disciples dropped everything to follow Jesus. They wanted to be with him. They wanted to become like him, and eventually they wanted to do what he was doing. We can't just take the time with Jesus and learning from Jesus and just drop it. It's not going to work. We have to do the things that Jesus did. And for all of us, this is going to look different. This is so cool. This might mean in your families of serving those in your family, serving those in your community, leading, teaching, counseling people who are just going through some mess right now that maybe you have already gone through. What a good opportunity to be and do the things that Jesus did and pour into them. Or maybe it's this one I challenge you all to do because it's so hard, is follow the pace of the life of Jesus. Follow the pace of the life of Jesus. As we look back, Jesus wasn't rushing around. He wasn't screaming at his disciples to get ready and put on their shoes and put on their socks. There was no rush. But somehow, he got everything done. There was no rush. So can we follow that pace of life that Jesus showed? So what are you doing to be with Jesus? How are you becoming like Jesus? What things can you do to replicate the things that Jesus has shown you? Those are all questions that we need to keep in front of us as we are following Jesus, as we are apprentice under Jesus. Keeping them in front of us will help us definitely throughout the year of becoming more like him, helping us to do the things that he did.